This is Plant-Based Briefing, The Mother Turkey and Her Young by Karen Davis, President of United Poultry Concerns at upc-online.org. And I'm Marian Erickson, host of this curated content plant-based podcast for people short on time but curious about plant-based and vegan living. I narrate, with permission, a variety of articles on the many reasons to live vegan. And today's article is also related to Thanksgiving, as were the previous two episodes. It's by Karen Davis. She's the president and founder of United Poultry Concerns, which is a nonprofit that promotes the compassionate and respectful treatment of domestic fowl, including a sanctuary for chickens in Virginia. She is an expert on chickens, turkeys, and other domesticated fowl. And as I mentioned at the end of yesterday's episode, I didn't realize until yesterday that I had actually found this article back in 2011 when my then 9-year-old daughter was horrified that, as former vegetarians, I had started eating animals again and I was preparing a Thanksgiving turkey. She was empathizing with the baby turkeys when, in her words, she imagined they stand by helplessly and watch their mothers get picked up and carried away. So I sat down at the computer to research and be able to put her at ease, basically, that turkeys don't need their mothers. It's nothing to worry about. Nobody's harmed. So I remember Googling something to the effect of, do baby turkeys need their mothers? And sadly, I found out that, yeah, they do. And no, this is not cruelty-free, even though I bought a local, quote-unquote, humanely raised turkey. So I didn't get the answer I was looking for, and I wasn't able to appease her. And just looking back yesterday, Googling this UPC article, I remember this is the one that I saw way back then. And it's such a shame that I didn't read the whole thing because it was disturbing. And it took many years before I was ready to learn and listen to the truth. So now let's get to today's plant-based briefing. The Mother Turkey and Her Young by Karen Davis at upc-online.org. Unlike baby songbirds and raptors whose parents are absent for long periods gathering food for their young, ground-nesting birds, such as turkeys, stay close to their mothers for months after they're born. Young turkeys, known as poults, panic if they become separated from their mother. When a young turkey has wandered away from his family and discovers that he is alone, he gives out a lost call, a loud, persistent shriek of distress. Hearing the cry of her terrified youngster, his mother responds instantly with anxious yelps, which he answers, and then, opening his wings, he gives them a joyous flap or two, and with a few sharp, quick yelps of relief, he runs to rejoin his family. People in modern society have become so used to seeing thousands of young turkeys crowded together in factory farm sheds awaiting their death that many are surprised to learn about the lively poults and their mothers chasing grasshoppers in a meadow, sunning themselves and dust bathing together, leaving, as naturalist Joe Hudo writes in Illumination in the Flatwoods, A Season with the Wild Turkey, quote, tiny bowl-shaped impressions the size of small wild turkey bodies, unquote. A delightful picture of the wandering hen and her brood appears in A.W. Shorker's book, The Wild Turkey, quote, they hurry along as if on a march to some particular point, sometimes tripping along in single file, one behind the other, and at other times scattered through the woods for 50 yards or more. When on these scattered marches, it is pleasant to note some straggling youngster as he wanders out of sight of the main flock in an attempt to catch a fickle-winged butterfly, or delays by the wayside scratching amid the remains of a decayed log in search of a rich morsel in the shape of a grubworm. When he discovers that he is alone, he raises himself up, looks with his keen eyes in every direction for the flock, and, failing to discover them, gives the well-known coarse cluck. Then he raises his head high in the air and listens intently for his mother's call. As soon as it is discovered that one is missing, the whole flock stops, and the young turkeys raise their heads and await the signal from their mother. When she hears the note of the lost youngster, she gives a few anxious yelps, which he answers, and then, opening his wings, he gives them a joyous flap or two, and with a few sharp, quick yelps, he goes on a run to join his companions. During their first weeks of life, young turkeys sleep in their ground nest, snuggled in the soft feathers of their mother. After a month or so, they fly at dusk onto a low tree branch where, in the words of John J. Audubon, they, quote, place themselves under the deeply curved wings of their kind and careful parent, dividing themselves for that purpose into two nearly equal parties, unquote. But even after they've taken to roosting in the trees at night, young turkeys stay with their mother, who remains the center of their universe for another 4 or 5 months until the next mating season. In 1645, a New England observer reported seeing 60 broods of young wild turkeys with their mothers, quote, on the side of a marsh, sunning themselves in a morning betimes, unquote. Turkeys in the commercial food industry have a totally different experience from those who hatch in the nest with their brothers and sisters under their mother's wings. Commercially raised turkeys struggle out of their shells amid thousands of other embryos in incubator drawers in huge mechanical hatcheries. They never know their mother because she is locked away somewhere in a breeder facility, where a baby turkey's lost calls, his peeps and trills, will never be heard. The young birds will never know the joy of roaming the woods and fields with her. They will never know the comfort she brings. Instead, during their first 3 hours after breaking out of their shells, turkeys in commercial hatcheries undergo a series of painful amputations, major surgeries that, according to the trade journal Turkey World, leave them traumatized. A recent investigation by the nonprofit group Compassion Over Killing showed how, from the moment of hatching, the turkey poults were, quote, submerged into a world of misery, unquote. The newborn turkeys were dumped out of metal trays, jostled onto conveyor belts, after being mechanically separated from cracked eggshells, then sorted, sexed, debeaked, and detowed, all without anesthetic. Countless baby turkeys were mangled from the machinery, suffocated in plastic bags, and dumped into the same disposal system as the discarded eggshells they were separated from hours earlier. The mother turkey, meanwhile, has been relegated by the turkey industry to the abject status of a quote-unquote breeder. This deeply maternal bird, who in nature will pretend to be hurt to distract a predator's attention to herself away from her poults, who will fight with a passion to protect her young that would make the eagle seem tame, in the words of an awed observer, has been stripped to helplessness. Instead of mating naturally with a male turkey, the turkey hen is subjected to the ignominy of artificial insemination, from which nearly all commercial turkeys now derive. The artificial insemination of turkeys, known by the industry as, quote-unquote, breaking the hens, is graphically depicted in Peter Singer and Jim Mason's book, The Way We Eat, Why Our Food Choices Matter. In my own book, More Than a Meal, The Turkey in History, Myth, Ritual, and Reality, I describe the condition associated with artificial insemination known as deep pectoral myopathy. In it, the terrified, quote-unquote, breeder turkey's chest muscles literally strangled to death in a seizure brought on by the birds struggling and wing beating in the process of being, quote-unquote, broken by the inseminators. The quote-unquote harvesting of semen from male turkeys is similarly horrific. Animal rights advocates are encouraging people to give thanks compassionately this holiday season with an all-vegan feast. As a songwriter once wrote, quote, a turkey on the table is frightful, but a tofurkey with all the trimmings is so delightful, unquote. Truly it is. You just listened to The Mother Turkey and Her Young by Karen Davis of United Poultry Concerns at upc-online.org, and I'm your host, Marian Erickson. I find it really shocking the juxtaposition Karen outlines here with turkeys raised in the wild and turkeys hatched and raised for animal agriculture. In her book, More Than a Meal, The Turkey in History, Myth, Ritual, and Reality, she also says the following, quote, according to wildlife biologist William Healy, the social life of turkeys begins well before hatching, when they're inside the egg, and is well developed by the time the young birds leave the nest. Vocal communications between the turkey hen and her embryonic chicks is critical to the survival of the chicks, whose long association with their mother for nearly half a year after they hatch seems essential, he writes. By contrast, the process of hatching eggs in incubators and raising poults in mechanical brooders interrupts the social experiences that form the foundation for a normal and happy life in turkeys, unquote. And it's interesting, I mentioned that I started reading this article and didn't get the answer I was looking for. I was horrified to learn that the babies are terribly distressed and call out for their mothers when they're separated. That's as far as I got. In reading this article for this episode right now, I had to stop a couple times because it brought me to tears. And again, I do wish I had read this the first time round, because if I had educated myself, maybe I wouldn't have contributed to the cruelty for as long as I did. But it is so easy now to have a cruelty-free, joyous Thanksgiving feast. There are products on the market that are available that you can buy, vegan turkey roasts. Tons of recipes out there too if you prefer to create your own. They're pretty easy to make and they're so delicious. So please share this episode with anyone who might benefit, and thanks for listening.